Okay, Joel, thank you very much. So, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and I even now heard that we need to say good night wherever you are coming from. I'm Ishay Benshushan. I'm leading the Quality Business Analysis group in Force Scout. I must say that I'm very happy to be part of this great conference. For me, it's a real pleasure to talk about something that I'm really passionate about. I called it QIA, which stands for Quality Intelligent Assistant. So in the next 30 minutes or so, I will talk about using QIA to lead and improve quality. So I said it's going to be very challenging after Gary's great session. She set a very high standard, and I try to keep it. I think that it's a very important way of thinking in order to make the difference of your testing is like how or what you need to do in order to improve it. So we talk about why do you need the intelligent assistant in order to plan your test or in order to better cover the area that you want to cover. So probably you know that testing is an important element in quality practices in order to create a working software. But the thing with testing is that it can be a little tricky. You know that many tests can be carried out and they can also find many defects, but how can we be sure that we did the right test and that we discover the right defect, right, or that we discover the most important one? In other words, how can we validate the test to ensure they are the best means to make the software a working software? I try to get into some idea how to avoid the embarrassing situation in which all your tests passed successfully, but the product crashed on the customer site, or even worse, on the first customer installation. So I will present QIA and QIA principle, and I will present how QIA allows user to manage and track quality levels while constantly improving the quality safety net. Okay, so this is a little about me. 20 years in the world of QA, most of them in the security world. Currently, it's 3 years at Forescout. Before that, I worked at different companies such as Tufin and Checkpoint. I'm like to learn all the time. I'm participating on such a great conferences on a regular basis, part of them as a student, part of them as a speaker. But I always love to learn more stuff and to know more things or more ways to do quality better. A little about the company I'm working for. So Forescout Technology Security Platform is enable enterprises and government agencies to gain complete awareness of their extended enterprise environment. In order to reduce cyber and other kind of attacks. I will use this info later in the session in order to explain from this world how can we better develop the test. In addition, if we try to think about Gary's session before, so just try to think in such a world how many personas there are and how many personas we need to think about while doing tests in such a complex environment. Okay then, so let's start. So what I'm going to talk about. So like, you know, Benjamin Franklin once said that well done is better than well said. While this sounds great, but in our world, what is well done? In the world of quality, when we're trying to say well done, what we mean, right? And in this world, what is the difference between well done and well said? So the reason that I developed QIA is to avoid the cases that we talked about before, in which you think the quality rocks, right? The test coverage is excellent, You send a report and the report looks great, but then you get the unpleasant issue from customer on the field, right? In addition, from time to time, you can even get questions from the customer that asking you, can you please show me how did you test it? Because it sounds very basic what happened in my environment. So QIA principle will assist every QA engineer and every QA manager with the following: to test the or to measure the test effectiveness. I will elaborate about it. To plan on and to create a great and effective test coverage, and above all that, to measure the quality. So here are the questions that I will help you to ask and I will answer during this session. So do you know how effective your test and what is your truly test coverage? Do you know what is the right way to develop very effective test? Do you really know what the quality level of the product produced by your organization is? Do you know how to measure it? You know how to avoid the trap of replace good coverage with many tests. So I think it's very crucial to QA managers or QA engineers to have the ability to measure the quality, because only if you can measure quality, then you can improve it. So in this session, I will present few methods that you can use in order to measure the quality and to do it right. However, I must say a word of warning. The problem with such a measurement, or with the problem with measurement of this nature, is that they can be very tricky to perform. So if you are not careful, you can be easily fooled. So you need to know what you are doing. Okay, so let's talk a little about Agile and quality. So in Agile, quality is very important part. Agile principle and Agile manifesto emphasize the importance of the quality. No one will tell you that quality is not important, but also no one will tell you what is a good quality. Or as it's defined in the Agile principle, no one will tell you what is a working software. Is it means that we completed all our tests? Is it means that we fixed all the bugs? So what it means working software? How can we tell if we executed the right test and that we found and fixed the right bugs? Although it sounds very simple to answer, I will give during this session a few examples to show why it is not so simple as it sounds like. So another question, even though it sounds very simple question, why to test, right? So we all executing tests all the time, right? It's very important part of the quality layer. But did you ever ask yourself why to test? Did you ask what are you looking to get from the test that you executed? So I must tell you that definitely the answer is not to find defect. This is not the answer. This is not what we are executing the test for. The answer, in my opinion, is to get info, right? We are executing the test in order to be smarter and to get more information about our product. And especially, I think what we are trying to do by running the test is we are looking to predict how happy the customer will be with these releases, right? And there are two aspects for that. The first one is, did we provide answer to all the customer requirements? And the second one is regarding the quality. Did we found all the defects that will make the customer unhappy with us, right? And like Hippocrates said once, so there are two things, there is science and opinion. So what we are looking to get from the test is not the opinion of what we think, what is our opinion about the quality level of the product. We're trying to make it very scientific and to know exactly how can we tell what is the quality level of this specific release. So if you can't answer those questions, right, about the customer requirement and the quality, then why to execute the test? So they might be the right one, they might be the right test, but that will be pure luck with some intuition. So the question is, do you really want to trust on luck while doing your test? So naturally, in our world, missing gorilla, it means that we missed a bug, right? And in many cases, a very embarrassing one that we missed and was discovered at the field by one of our customers, which is not so pleasant for us. So the first step that you want to do is to measure the effectiveness of your test, right? This is the first step in order to be sure that you are executing a very effective test and that you are on the right way to create a very good safety net to ensure you will not miss any gorillas, right? And like James Harrington said, and it's a quote that I very much like, so measurement is the first step that leads to control and eventually to improvement. If you can't measure something, you cannot understand it. If you cannot understand it, you can't control it. If you can't control it, you can't improve it. And we are always looking for ways to improve our method and to improve our quality. And more than that, to look for the places that we need to improve them. So measurement is the first step in order to do it. So the big question is, what is the right way to measure the effectiveness of the test? Right, so it is not how many defects it found, it is all about how many important defects it found, right? So we don't like to look at on the forest and see there are many trees. We want to find the right trees, right? So it is also about what it covers, right? Can you explain why you execute this test? Do you know what will be the risk if you won't execute it, right? If you don't know, if you cannot answer it, if you can't answer what will be the risk if I will not do this test, then why are you executing it? So for every test that you're executing, you need to have a way to measure its effectiveness. You can do it by measuring the important bug it's found and the risk it covers. I will talk more deeply about it in a few slides, but I will also give a few examples. But currently what I'm trying to say now is that quality is not an accident, right? It's always a result of intelligent effort that we need to do it all the time in order to make sure that we are releasing with high quality. So the first key principle that we talk about is to track the test effectiveness. Right? This is the first step that you want to do. So the next step will be to develop the right test so that they will find the right defect. In addition, you want to make sure that there are no black holes in your test metrics that result in defects that only the customer will find. So I think that the secret sauce for doing that is to be very well familiar with your customers. And maybe I can give you a good example from the world of network and security. So in the world of network and security, many network and security administrators, they have very limited windows, opportunity or time to implement changes to their system. They cannot do it whenever they want. So if the QA engineers that test it is not familiar with such needs, he may not cover a scenario in which there is a need to implement many changes over a short period of time. And guess what? He will miss stuff. And you know what? And it will make the customer very unhappy because the customer will not be able, or there is no way to ensure that the customer will be able to do so many changes on the short period of time because no one tested it. So we definitely want to be familiar with our customers, or like Jerry said before, like with those persona. And definitely, I will not repeat it, so I go quickly over it. So when you are executing the test or planning them, so come on, don't be a QA engineer for a moment, okay? Just put the hat of your customer and try to think like him. What he cares about, what his use cases, any specific configuration that he have. So definitely you need to be very familiar with your customer in order to achieve it. And probably the best way to achieve is to meet with your customer face-to-face. Right? Face-to-face is the only way or the best way that you can get the best information from them and the best way for them to share this knowledge with you. So we'll talk about a little about who you want to meet with, right? So from at least from the world that I'm coming from, the world of network and security, the guys that you want to meet with are those that actually using your product. Even so, it's very tempting from time to time to meet with their big manager or something like that. They will not give you the info that you are looking for. In addition to that, we're always trying to meet with the customer on the same place that they are working. We are not going to a meeting room or something like that. We want to be on the customer in the customer environment, to feel the customer, to see how our products look like on his screen, right? He's used one screen, two screen, big screen, I don't know. What other application he's using at the same time, right? And let me give you some tips here. As a QA leader, as a QA engineer, you are looking to meet with your biggest customer, or you are looking to meet with the customer that is very angry about you. Because from those customers, you will get you will get very much information. And in addition, I think that you will be surprised by the fact how the customer will be happy from the fact that someone from your organization is coming to him and he cares about him and he wants to listen to him and to understand what are his needs. So I think it's a very good opportunity for us in the world of the QA. I want to share with you also what I'm calling is the first visit syndrome. So you know, it's like it's very nice to see the impression or the face of someone who just returned from his first customer visit. It's nice to see how many new ideas and how many sentences like, hey, you know what, we must add this test, or why are we executing that test? No one is using the feature like that, or we must change our topology and stuff like that. It's very nice to see. So now here's a little question for you. In your lab, do you have an environment in your lab that replicate any of your customer environment? Can you say that this environment is similar to customer X or Y or I don't know what? If you don't have such environment, I think this is the right time for you to do it. Okay, so let's take a very simple example how we can test or measure the test effectiveness. And what is the right way to do it, right? So let's take this very simple example. Let's say that we are testing very simple calculator, right? Not on the computer, a real one, right? So now we need to plan the test, right? So we cover the next area. We do some basic calculation. We did a very complex calculation. We also test the color option on the screen and stuff like that. Okay, now what you need to know that we have two kinds of customer, right? That using this calculator. So one of them is a third grade student. What he cares about is only the size of the screen and the keyboard. And the other customer is a salesman who is working always outside and is all cares about the screen readability on a direct sunlight because this is the place that is using the calculator. So if you didn't know that, if you didn't talk with them and you didn't get this requirement for them, you definitely may find yourself wasting your time and the developer time in areas that no one cares about them, right? If you tested very complex exercises, you probably find there very few defects, but no one cares about it because the student in third grade doesn't care about very complex exercise, and same goes for the salesman. He doesn't care about it. So you wasted your time. Also, if you tested the color option, no one's care about. On the other side, you may miss important tests such as testing under direct sunlight. And if you didn't test it, probably the salesman will not be happy with the product. Okay, so let's go back for QIA principle number 1, track the test effectiveness, and see what we have here, right? So the effectiveness rate of testing a very complex exercise and same for the color of the screen will be very low. It will probably won't find any important defects and won't cover any risk, right? Because if we will not execute this test, no risk will be for any of the customer. So now that we can understand it while planning it, the effective rate will tell us don't run this test. From the other side, testing basic calculation and testing under direct sunlight will have a very high effectiveness rate, right? So QIA principle number 1 will tell us, hey, you must run this test. It is a very important one. In addition for that, if you don't have the cover for what the customer is looking for, then it means that the test is effective, but it is not enough. We don't have enough tests. We need to increase it. We need to increase the safety net. So the second principle is to plan effective tests while integrating customer scenarios and feedback all the time in your testing execution and test planning. So the next and the last step that I will talk about is to measure the quality after the release in order to track the quality trend. So the reason that we are doing this is in order to understand if this release is better than the previous one and what is the quality trend in our organization, right? So since you want to compare apples with apples, you must be sure you perform post-releases measurement effectively, right? Let's say that it's very obvious that having 0 field defects on a project you just released or released 2 days ago doesn't necessarily mean the project is of high quality, right? But when can you tell it for sure? At what point can you say that this version is better than a previous one, right? To make an effective decision, you will need to collect the following data, right? You will need to collect the number of field defects that have been discovered by naturally the customers after the release. You also need to collect the info that the number of customers that using this version. If you don't have this info, you can use how much time it has been in the field. Let's say that you can test it after 2 or 3 months in order to try to compare apple with apple. And by having this info, you can compare the 2 versions and you can decide which one is better and what is your quality trend. So let's talk a little about this example, right? So in this example, by measuring the field defect at the point the release was installed by 500,000 customers, we can compare 2 releases and decide which one is of a higher quality, right? For example, let's say that we have 3 releases. Release A that was released in April, release B that was released in June, and release C that was released in August. as soon as 500,000 customers had installed each respective release, we measured how many defects those customers reported. And we saw that release A had 15 defects, release B had 8 defects, and release C had 12 defects. So what it means? It means that release B is clearly better than release A, right? Because less defects were discovered after the release on the same point of time that we are measuring, right? Which is good. However, we can also see that release B is also better than release C, which is bad, right? Because we want the quality trend to be good. So now that we have this info, at this point, you can take action, right? If you observe any form of degradation in quality, you must get to the heart of what caused this degradation and to take proactive steps in order to remedy it immediately, even if that means that now you need to complete the test that you didn't cover and to release a maintenance release in order to fix it as soon as possible. But the fact that you are measuring it and you have this knowledge give you the control of the quality of the control of your releases instead of always react to what happened on the field with no ways to control it. So the third QIA principle will be measure your quality trend and take the needed action in order to improve it all the time. Okay, so let's a little discuss what we talked about. We talked about understanding the principle of QIA, how to plan and test according to QIA principle while building the right quality safety net, and what is the right way to measure quality in a way that will comparison with previous releases in order to improve all the time. So thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you all very much.
Ishay, thanks a lot for the session. And I think that there were quite a lot of points that are not only very interesting, but very useful. And I want to start with one that is very close to my heart because I have been advocating for that for quite a while. And you talked about meeting customers upfront, usually go to the place where they're working and observing them. In my experience, that it's great, but there's usually a little bit of friction when you try to get your management to agree on that. Do you have any tips based on your experience on how to get management to agree on making those visits, on interacting directly with customers?
Yeah, so you're right. It's very challenging to try to meet with the customer from different reason. Let's say that the salespeople will afraid about it, and some other will be afraid about it. So I think that the right way is for you to explain what's in it for the customer, right? So then you can help the one that coordinate this meeting, and also for your manager or stuff like that, you can explain what's in it for the customer, right? And for the customer, what's in it for him, is that you can tell him, listen, by me visiting the customer, you can tell him that I will cover his scenarios and his environment on my test. So that result will be that he will get a much better quality that is very specific for this customer, right? So this answer your question, or you ask something else?
No, it does, and I guess that it also connects that answer to the concept of personas that Jerry was also saying before, and even those scenarios. Now, guys, I want to remind you, you can use the Q&A to ask questions, and let's go over some of the questions that are here because I think that they're very interesting. On a practical level, Sandy is asking, how do you determine the time frame for the quality trend metrics? For example, when do you stop counting defects? When do you stop the line? I think that you mentioned, well, I'm not sure that you mentioned a number of months, but how do you define when do you start comparing apples to apples?
So I'll do it all the time. I never stop doing it until I see there is no customer that's using this specific release, or that we decide that this release is the end of life, so no one cares about it because we are not going to fix any defect on it. But I'm tracking it all the time. I never stop tracking it because I always can find there something that even though it's end of life, I want to fix it in the next release, or I want to improve my test coverage. So there's no reason to stop tracking it.
Okay. A question here for Tanya. If you don't have the number of customers that install your product, what other measures can you use? She believes that you said one, but she missed it. But if you have more ideas, if we don't have the numbers for that.
Yeah, so the only one that I managed to find is how many days it's already on the field, right? So you can track it after 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. I don't think, I didn't manage to think about any other a way to compare apples with apples.
By the way, I think that one point that I can give from my side on that, maybe to help to answer, it's on the side of instrumentation, especially if you're working with in hosted or SaaS systems, where given that the application actually resides in your place, it's not only even about how many people are using it, but if you release the feature and people are using it at all, and what's their feedback. So again, just to add myself, I don't want to steal the show in there. There's a question here that I find interesting, and Mohan actually saying, with regards to customer and their feedback and stuff like that, how do you include in your model the concept of alpha testing, beta testing, maybe even crowd testing? Is there any reference to that?
Yeah, so sure. The beta test is something that are executed on the customer side, right? So you can do it with the customer. You can go to the customer and do the beta test on his side, and to get his feedback and to get his scenarios and configuration, and then to see how it reacts on your product. So definitely there is good point of doing it, but I think what is more benefit from going to beta side beside finding the defect that you will find on the customer side is to get back into your lab and to implement those scenarios and those configuration on your lab in order to make sure and to complete the test that the customer didn't see on his side. So I think this is the biggest benefit from doing such a test.
Okay. I guess that we have time for one last question here. And again, I think that people really like the concept, but they're trying to grasp it on a more concrete level. And the question here is, what is your actual calculation for test effectiveness? This person has seen calculations such as number of defects divided by adoption times 100. Do you have any formula that you like using more or less?
Yeah, so the formula that I like to use is how many risks it covers, right? I mean, if this is the formula that I'm looking at, and what defect that we found are part of this risk. This is the formula, right? So if the defect is not part of this risk, then I don't count him as one that I care about the effectiveness rate. I'm not calculating how many the adoption rate on this phase is not exist yet because I didn't release the product yet. So it's still in the testing phase. So I only have the number of risks that I have and the number of defects that found on these specific risks.
Okay. A question here that actually I didn't understand at first, but then it became clear. How do you fit this concept of QIA in an agile environment, maybe an environment where you're having releases every 2 weeks, or a continuous release environment where releases actually are constant? Do you have any ideas on how to adapt it when you have a flowing release cycle?
Yeah, definitely. So first, for every sprint in Agile, right? So there is the way that you are planning the test, right? So you need to make sure that for every sprint that the tests are effective. And there is no other way to do it besides the way that I explained before. In addition to that, what is your automation suite, right? So you need to make sure that even though that we are releasing every 2 weeks or every month, that your automation suite or your safety net is cover all the areas that you care about, right? That you can't release every 2 weeks if you don't make sure that the customer will be happy with this release, right? Let's take the calculator for example, right? Let's say that we're adding a new feature for the calculator, right? But I will still need to make sure that the salesman will be able to read it under direct sunlight, even that I didn't do anything that may affect it, right? So I still need to make sure that for every release I cover all the risky area that will that have effect on the customer.
Okay, and I guess that we have time for one last question before we move on. And by the way, there's quite a lot of feedback on the channel, and people really like the presentation and the ideas here. So the last question that I think that I'm going to bring here is, can we track the quality through defects leakage rather than the defect detection? Meaning mostly about what we didn't find and then what we found. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think it's two different layers, right? This is what I said. This is the third QIA principle, to track the leakage. Exactly, this is what we are looking for. We try to track how many defects we missed. All right, and then we can compare the different releases and to know what is our trend according to the leakage. And after by measure it, we can decide what action we need to do, right? And I think it's very good practice to track the leakage defect that we didn't find.
Sounds great. So Ishay, once again, I do want to thank you for a great presentation. Guys, I remind you to go ahead and move over to the Slack channel, where hopefully Ishay will have some time to actually answer more questions. We're also posting feedback requests. So on the channels where we're on the Slack channels, we'll put links to your feedback forms. Please go ahead and fill them out. They're really important to us. They're really important to the presenters. So we really would love it if you can go ahead and just again, fill them out. Very simple, very quick. You can just go ahead and fill them out.